All right. The visual is the only part I got yesterday here. So here's the auditory. First of all, let me get a bigger screen. All right, let me pause that. If you're going to buy something for $2,200 and you have to pay tax to 7.8%, you can either multiply the 2,200 times 0.078 and add the 2,200, or you can just multiply it by 1.078. The 1 times 2,200 is 2,200, and the 0.078, that is the tax rate. And you don't have to put a zero after the 6. But you can. The calculator doesn't know it's money. We're used to looking at 60 when it's 60 cents. Let me get the video to catch up with us, and then I'll continue. There you go. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Great. Now, problem 2 is a little different for problem 1 because you have a number 63,962.50, which includes the tax. What you don't do is don't multiply that number by 0.075 to get the tax. You have to realize that that number is some other number increased by 0.075 of itself. That's why we have to divide by 1.075 to get the answer to the question, what was the price before tax? All right. Problem 3 has to do with the percent decrease. Whether it's a percent increase or decrease doesn't matter. Either way, you take the difference of the old and the new and divide that difference by the old value. Not the big one, not the little one, but the old one. When you do that, it says round to the nearest 0.1%. So move the decimal point 2 places to the right, you get 28.98. And the 9 is where the 0.1% is. The 8, however, is not big enough is big enough indeed to bump up 9, but you can't put anything bigger than 9 in there. So you go to the next digit to the left and you make it 29.0. And that's what you do in case you have to round it up. But you've already got a 9 where it's supposed to go. So number 4, we're going to put aside some money, and at the end of a year, we're going to get $5,000 into our bank account based upon whatever we deposit plus the interest. Again, you do not multiply the $5,000 times 0.07 because that's not what you're going to deposit. 5,000 instead is some number that you do deposit plus 7% of that number you do deposit. And that number plus 7% of itself is 107% of itself. So 5,000 must be 107% of something. And to figure out what that something is, you have to divide that by 1.07. All right. Number 5, we're going to make some sausage, 40% pork, 35% beef, and the rest is venison, and the rest is 300 pounds. What you have to realize is the 300 pounds of venison is some percent of the total weight, and the pork and beef, or 40 plus 30, is 75%. So you subtract that from 100% and you get 25%. Therefore, the venison is 25% of the total amount. So you have to figure out what 300 is 25% of. And that's why you divide it by 0.25 and you get 1,200. But the question is, how much beef? You've got to multiply that by 0.35. Oh, if I asked for pork, you'd multiply it by 0.4. But if you just put 1,200, that's not the question that I've asked. Number 6, the donuts again. In this case, the $9.85 tax included, you do not multiply that $9.85 by the tax rate 0.0775 and subtract it. Because why? Because 985 already has a tax in there. It's 107.75% of some number before tax. That's why you have to divide by 1.0775. Notice there's two sevens. I put an extra digit after the 4 so we can tell whether to round it to 915 or leave it. And the one's not big enough. Now the question asks for the tax, and the tax is 71 cents, not 0.71 cents. Or you could write $0.71. Now, by the way, the donuts were $9.14 without the tax. And sometimes I ask you for two things. I ask you for the price of the donuts and the tax. And if you don't give me both of those, you're going to lose points. Yikes. And of course, it's rounded to the nearest penny. All right. So Dr. Lemon is going to let a dealer help her sell her car, and the dealer's commission will be 20% of the selling price. Notice it's not 20% of the $58,000 that she wants after the sale. After it's sold, it's 20% of the total selling price. That means the selling price is divided into two pieces. The 20% that goes to the dealer, and the rest is the other 80%. So to figure out what is $58,000 the 80% of, you have to divide it by 0.8 and get 72,500, and that's the answer. Number 8 is a pretty tricky problem. In this case, you know the drive-out cost and the taxes is 8%, and the fees is $297, not tax, and the discount is 5%. So take that into account. First thing you have to do is take the out-the-door price, subtract the $297. Let's see if I can get caught up with the calculator here. And that gives you 15,903, and that includes 8% tax. So it's some number plus 8% of that number. Well, that's 108% of that number, and that's why you have to divide that by 1.08. And that gives you 14,725. But that number reflects a 5% discount. So that means it's the other 95%. That means that the actual cost was, the sticker price is $15,500. Cool. All right, number 9. If you want to take some money out to remodel your kitchen, but you have to pay the government 27% of the amount withdrawn, not 27% of 48,000. You don't know how much is withdrawn, but here's what you do know. If the amount withdrawn is separated into two pieces, the IRS is 27%, and Georgia has the other 48,000. Oh, but the percentage-wise, 100 minus 27 is 73%. So what is 48,000 73% of? You would have to divide it in order to get that answer, 65,753.424. It said rounded to the nearest dollar, and the 4 in 42 cents is not big enough. So that's why it's just 65,753. All right, the Spurs win 47 and lose 35, and you want another winning percentage. You divide 47 by the total number of games, which is 47 plus 35, and you get 0.5731. Round it to the nearest 0.1%, means where the 3 is, 57.3. 1 is not big enough. That's why you leave it at 57.3%. There are other similar problems coming up. All right. This is a really tricky problem. The person I learned this problem from was giving a seminar on government grants, and he didn't know how to work the problem. Interesting. So 2.5 million is $2,500,000. That is not the total budget, however, that's the grant. Oh, 2% of the total budget means that the grant, which is the rest, that's the other $2.5 million. And that's got to be the other 98%. That's why I divide that by 0.98 to figure out the total budget. Sorry, this is kind of slow. And that's 2,551,020 and 41 cents. However, that is the total budget, but the college pays 2% of that. So the quickest way to do that is just multiply it by 0.02. And if you do, and round it to the nearest penny, you get $51,020.41. If you don't round it to the nearest penny, it's just wrong. Yikes. So the Minnesota team has won 100 games and lost 60 over the last 10 years. That means you want to know their winning percentage, you divide the number of wins, 100, by the number of games. This is just like the Spurs problem. That's 100 divided by 160, and I've asked for two answers. One, rounded to the nearest 0.001, which turns out to be 0.625, which is 62.5. It comes out even, so you don't have to worry about any rounding. It's already right there at the nearest 0.1%. All right, next is a similar problem. 100 men for every 60 women. So if you want to know the percent of women, that's 60 out of 100 plus 60. So that's 60 divided by 160 is 0.375. And that's 37.5% exactly. Notice that that's the rest of the 62.5 plus 37.5 is 100. Similar problem, only I'm asking for a different ratio. Number 14 is one of the trickiest problems you're ever going to see in percent. I got this from a friend of mine who actually is a home builder. He said, well, I divide the selling price of the house. 5% of the selling price goes to salesperson, insurance gets 2, salaries get 20, advertising 3, and the rest is the lot, labor, and materials. Well, those 5, 2, 23 add up to 30%, so the rest must be the other 70%. And the other 70% consists of the $12,000 lot, the labor, which is 500 times 15, it's $15 an hour for 500 hours, and the materials, $45,000. So I'd like to just go ahead and multiply 500 times 15 on my calculator. Then I can just say plus 12,000 plus 45,000, and I will get 65,400. That is the other 70%, and that's why we have to divide it by 0.7. Now it says round to the nearest $100. Well, the hundreds place, well, the decimal point to the left is the ones, and then the 4 is the tens, and the 1 is 100, and the 1 is not big enough to make it 200. That's why the answer is 92,100. All right. Got to wait for my video to catch up, sorry. So the lot, labor, materials add up to 64,500. That's the other 70%. You must divide that by 0.7 to figure out what is it 70% of. And there's the answer. And then you round it to the nearest hundreds, which is where the 1 is. All right. And number 15, you have 25.1 students fail for every 100 who pass. What percent pass? Write your answer to the nearest 0.1%. And don't forget to do that. So you have to divide 100 of those who pass divided by 100 plus 25.1 who take the test, and you get 0.7993, which you move the point two places to the right, gives you 79.93%. The nearest 0.1% is that 9 just to the right of the decimal point. That's the 0.1. The 3, however, is not big enough to bump it up. But if you had to bump it up, you couldn't put a 10 in there. So you'd make it 80.0, believe it or not. And here's our special friend, which is worked out in great detail, a similar problem on page 6. How many A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's? Total's 25. To figure out the percent of each grade, you divide the number that got that grade by 25. And 4 divided by 25 is 0.16, which is 16%. It comes out even. In fact, they all come out even. For the B's, 6 divided by 25 is 0.24, 24%. And for the C's, 10 divided by 25 is 0.4. You move it 2 places to the right, you get 40%. D's 3 divided by 25 is 0.12, which is 12%. And there's 2 F's. 2 divided by 25 is 0.08 for 8%. 25 is a very special number. It goes into 100 exactly 4 times. So for example, with the A's, 4 out of 25 is the same thing as 16 out of 100 if you multiply top and bottom by 4. So you could do that, but most percents are not that agreeable.